I was in Fort Washington, Maryland, in fact, right down the street, at a friend of mine's mother and father's church. And the retreat was about breaking out of the norm and into we're breaking out of the world's normal for you and into Christ's normal that He had prepared you for. So it was about, the world system tells us so much stuff, and it tells us what we're supposed to look like, how we're supposed to dress, what we're supposed to eat. It tells us all this stuff, and none of that is in line with what God created us to do or be. So one of the pieces was we end up getting so stuck usually in one particular thing. We can end up getting stuck in a season of our lives that we either like or we became embittered while we were in it, and so we become stuck in it. And so one of the pieces that I work with was how to get unstuck, number one. And number two, when you get unstuck, what does that mean? What do you look like? And because I'm a gardener, it was easy for me to begin to look at the seasons of our lives based on the seasons of my plants, my roses, my azaleas, my rhododendrons, and the like, my irises. And the fact that they all bloom, they all in the same garden, but they all bloom at different times. And because they bloom at different times, they need different things. And so while they are all in spring, it doesn't mean the same thing. For my azaleas, it means that they're going to bloom. For my irises, depending on what time of spring it is, it depends on what they're going to be doing. For my roses, it means either they're going to die or they're going to live. And I've got to clip them, I've got to take care of them so that in the spring, which is their harvest season, they'll be prepared to be harvested. Transition can either be gradual or sudden. So when we're looking at our seasons are usually gradual. We can tell when we're about to go into winter because the days get shorter and the nights get longer. We can tell when different things are going on and we're about to go into spring because the air gets warmer, but still very crisp. And the same thing happens in our lives. Generally, things begin to happen slowly but surely. Marriages begin to deteriorate. Our relationships with our children begin to change as they get older. And we see the gradual change come on. And sometimes we can do something about it, but oftentimes we can't. It's simply a matter of course. But then you have other times like Job in the Bible. Job went from being a very rich man and overnight and having a bunch of kids and overnight having nothing. All his children were dead. All his camels and all his livestock were gone. And then in a very short period of time after that, he took sick. And so his season changed almost immediately. And that's one of the pieces that I talk about in the book, is that how to deal with gradual change as you see it coming versus sudden change. When you see yourself, when you know you're going into a different season, when you see things begin to change, one of the things that most of us don't do is we don't embrace it. And it's really important that we embrace the change. It's important that you embrace the change because what you end up doing is fighting against the inevitable. God is moving us into a different place, a different season, a different level, a different elevation, a different dimension. And fighting it isn't going to help you. What has happened generally is God has positioned you, if you've been paying attention, if you've been reading your Bible and praying, He has been trying to position you to understand that you're about to change, and everything you need going into the new season, He's already prepared for you in the previous seasons. Too often we go unprepared into a new season because we didn't allow Him, or we didn't embrace the change which was going to prepare us or propel us into the next season. And every season has a good part and every season has a bad part. If you could talk to my roses, they would tell you their worst season is probably spring, because in spring I go in, I start tearing stuff out around them. I start ripping out the weeds. If I have to move them, I uproot them from where they are. I dig around them. I begin to clip them and take off anything that's dead and begin to clip them and prune them in the direction I want them to go. And none of that is easy for the rose, but it's all necessary. And they don't have a choice. They have to embrace the changes I'm taking them through because they can't say no. But too often we begin to fight. And by fighting, we don't allow ourselves to be groomed or to be dressed, if you will, for the season that God is about to take us into. And all of the seasons, whether it's the spring and in the summer, they're blooming, they're gorgeous. I've got 12 different rose bushes. They're all different colors and they all have different leaves and their array is gorgeous. But then they got to deal with the bugs and the heat and so forth. And as the gardener, it is my job then to make sure that in the spring, I have done everything I need to do to make sure that they can get through the summer season. And that's the same thing for us. In the springs of our lives, when we're coming out of our winter, when we're going into our new area, God is beginning to pull stuff out of us. He's beginning to rearrange things in us. He's beginning to remove people from our lives. He's beginning to make changes, and we are so accustomed to certain people or certain things, we try to hold on to them. And God is saying, I'm going to rip it out. Like it or not, I'm about to rip this out. And some of the things that he's ripping out are things that we've become so accustomed to, even though they're things that we don't need, don't want, and should never have had. We have become so accustomed to them, we want to hold on to them. He's going to rip them out of our hands or out of our lives, whether we like it or not. So we need to embrace that change. And we need to let go of the things or the people even that he's trying to remove from us. And he's doing that and he's feeding us and he's preparing us, because when we go into our summer season, we have to deal with the pest. My roses have to deal with the Japanese beetles and the bugs and all of that, but we have to deal with our own Japanese beetles. Our Japanese beetles are things that want to get into our lives, the world system, some of our friends, some of our families that want to infiltrate who we are, who we were prepared to be in Christ, and begin to eat us from the inside out, because that's what Japanese beetles do. They get into the middle of the rose and they begin to eat from the inside out. And those things in us that have been allowed to stay are begin to eat us from the inside out. But what God has done, if we've been paying attention and if we've allowed him and we've embraced what he has done for us in the spring season, he has begun to make us resistant to the bugs and the pests, to the aphids and all the things in us and the spider mites that want to come from the inside and the outside to begin to tear at the blooms that we are to put into the world system. And the blooms for us are our gifts, our talents, our abilities. Those are our blooms, the things that God has created in us. And generally, those are the things that we do without even thinking about it, that other people, that through our lives, even as children, people have come against us in us doing. They have made it difficult. They've talked about us. Oh, she think or he think this, that, and the other. And so we've begun to bury those things because they made us different. But that's why God placed us in his garden. Just like I pick out my roses based on the color and the leaves and the seasons that I want them to bloom and how I want them to be, God has picked us out to place in his garden for this, the way he wants us to bloom. He wants us to bloom in our gifts and our talents and our abilities. He wants us to be different colors. He wants our leaves, our foliage, even our thorns to be different. And so he has placed us and put us in these seasons and these places in our lives so that in due season, if we faint not, we will bloom and bring the harvest that he wants for us. And so we have to deal with the pest and the insects and all the stuff that goes on in our life system. But we have to have the word of God and prayer and even fasting to contend with the things that are going to be coming after us. And then we get to the part where everybody loves, that's our harvest season. That all the stuff we went through in the past, all the madness, all the bad marriages, the bad relationships, all the money losses, all the stuff that we had to go through. Now, because we have been doing what God told us to do, we've allowed him to plant us in a new place in our spring. We've dealt with all the pests and all the craziness from our summers. And now we're going into our harvest season and we're going to begin to reap what we've sown. And that is important because during the winter, spring, and summer, we still have to sow. And we reap what we sow in our harvest season because we're going to get back whatever it was we put out. And for some of us, that's a good thing because we were diligent, we were obedient, we were doing what God told us to do, even at the worst of our times. But for other of us, the reason your harvest season looks the way it does is because of what you were sowing when you should have been sowing something good, you were sowing gossip. When you should have been sowing peace, you were sowing war. When you should have been sowing contentment, you were sowing discontentment. So now it's your harvest season. So guess what you get? You get what you sowed. And so in our harvest season, we then begin to get in all the things that we have put in that we have sown in our spring season, in our summer season. We sowed it in spring, we took care of it in summer, and now here we are in harvest, and we're going to get that back, whatever it is. And so we get that back, and now you have to look at two different pieces. You have to look at seed and need. So you get back your harvest. You get part of it back to take care of what you need, to pay your mortgage, to pay your rent, to buy your clothes, to do what you need to do. And just remember, when you're in your harvest season, he said he'd supply all your needs, not your greeds. You only need so many Coach purses. You only need so many pairs of shoes. You only need so many dresses or clothes to wear. He said he would take care of your needs. So when you're taking care of your needs, now you have seed. You should have seed left from your harvest season to go and begin to sow into something new. So now that you're sowing into that new thing, you have the seed that you got in your harvest season. So now that seed is still giving you whatever it is it needs to give you. Plus you have new seed that you're going to plant into a new area, and you're going to put that in the ground, and it's going to go through its same seasons. And when it begins to go through its same seasons, you now still have seed or money, if you will, left over, or favor from God left over, that is going to carry you through your winter season, because winter season is coming. And when it comes, God does not, that's when you pray and you don't think God is hearing you. Money is looking funny. Change is looking strange. I mean, it's just everything is going crazy, and you can't figure out why. It's because it's your winter season. There's some things that now need to die away. Some time that you need to replenish yourself. That's what my roses do when they go into dormancy, and I clip them back for the last time before they go into winter. They have to feed off of what I gave them already, because I can't mess with them in their winter season because they're too fragile. And many of us don't understand, in our winter season, God doesn't really mess with us too much because we're too fragile. We're going through too much. Our hearts are broken. Our minds are out of sync. Things aren't happening the way they should be in our minds. And so God doesn't really do a lot with us. It's our dormancy. It doesn't mean he doesn't take care of us. It doesn't mean that he's not with us. I'm always with my roses, my azaleas, my lilies, whatever they are. I'm always with them. Even in the winter, in the snow, I'm making sure that they're okay, but I'm not messing with them. And God does the same thing to us. And all too often in that winter season, and this is the one season that most of us get stuck in. We get stuck in the bitterness of the season. We get stuck in the hurt of the season. We get stuck in the least of the season. And even when it's now time for us to go into replevin, or time for us to go into spring, we don't even want to move because we stuck back in winter. And between winter and spring is a season I call replevin. Replevin is a legal term that means that you get back that which was unlawfully taken from you. And so when you're about to go from winter into spring, you see things that you thought you had lost forever begin to be returned to you. Things that you didn't think you would ever see again begin to return to you. We call it in the natural, we see a light at the end of the tunnel. And so that's when we know that things are beginning to turn around. And so you don't get stuck. You don't let yourself get stuck in the bitterness, in the hatred, in the unhappiness of what the winter may have been for you. And so when I wrote the book, Walk in Your Season, I wrote it so that we could understand, one, what season we're in. Because there's nothing worse than trying to operate in a season that's not yours. So you're trying to be in harvest season and really you're in spring. In other words, you're trying to spend money and gather when you should be sowing. So that means when it's really time for you to reap, you won't have anything to reap because you weren't sowing. And so it really gives an overlook and an outlook of how to identify your season, how to live in that season. Because many of us don't know how to live in spring. We don't know how to live in summer. We hate winter, and we don't live in fall or in our harvest season as we should. Not only that, but it also gives biblical parallels of other people in the Bible who, like Job and David and even Jesus, who went through certain seasons in their lives. How did they get through them? And it gives some challenge questions. Let's take a real look at our lives. Where are we? What have we done? How have we been operating in this? And what can we do that's going to make it better? So Walk in Your Season is really a way to help everyone, Christian, non-Christian, because the truth be told, Even if you're an atheist, you begin to look for something higher than you when you're in your winter season. When you're going through and you don't know what to do with yourself, you really are hoping that there's someone out there greater than you to get you through this. So no matter what religion, no matter what faith, no matter what you say you do or do not believe, walking in your season will help you spiritually understand how it is you can get from one space in your life to the next and do it with victory. One of the pieces in walking your season is the challenge questions. And so if you're working in this by yourself, I always suggest people have a partner, even if it's just you and one other person, to really help you understand the truth of your life and where you really are. Because we, and particularly as women, because I can only speak from a woman's perspective, we are good at cover-up artistry. We don't really want to tell ourselves the truth all the time. But if you have a good friend who'll be like, yeah, girl, let me help you with that. Let me tell you some truth about where you are, and from where I see, then walking in your season will help you, even with you and one other person. If you have matured to the point where you're willing to tell yourself your own truths, it will still be good for you because there are the challenge questions. Almost every chapter has challenge questions. So that when you look at it and you begin to really tell the truth about yourself, those challenge questions will make you look inward as to where you really are. So that when you finish with your looking at each season and looking at how we're going to get through each season, you'll be able to tell yourself your truth. Well, I was in winter and I did not handle that well. And here's why I didn't handle it well. Here are some things I can do the next time, because just like every time we live, we go through another season. 2016 has their seasons. 2017 will have its seasons, and on and on. We in our own life have our own seasons. Some of them last for years. You may be in winter for years. You may be in spring for years. You may be in summer for years. But while you're in that, what is going on and how you get through it is the same. So how do you better get through it? How do you better maintain yourself in it? So that will be, that is, and if you're just doing it just yours, it's just you. If you're doing it as a group, then be aware of where you are versus someone else. And there's not a bad season or a better season or a good season. All seasons are seasons. So if you're in a group and you do this, and this is a good group Bible study, be aware of where everyone is. And there's no one in your group who has never been through winter. I don't care if they're rich. I don't care if they're the prettiest. I don't care. Everyone has gone through a winter season. Everyone has gone through a spring, a summer, and a fall. Everyone. And so just be aware of where you are and allow each person to speak to where they are, and the challenges that they're having and the triumphs that they're having in each of their seasons. In the book, one of the things we do as I talk about the different pieces of the seasons in the spiritual side and relate them back to the natural. So in wintertime, there are certain things that we find in our spiritual seasons. And a lot of times when we go into the winter season, we're going in with great intrepidation because we see the handwriting on the wall for whatever it is. The loss of a job, the loss of a relationship, the loss of something, because in winter you start losing. My roses lose their buds. They lose their leaves. They even lose their thorns. And so you think of winter as loss. And so even in the spiritual, winter becomes in loss. You might lose your desire to spend as much time with God as you have in the past. You might lose your desire to go to church every Sunday. You might lose your desire to pray as much as you did, because what's happened is in the natural. In the natural, you may be there may be a problem with your job. There may be a problem with your money. There may be a problem with your children. There may be different things going on, and so you find yourself losing an interest in God because you somehow feel as if He has He's neglecting you, or if He's betrayed you, because you find yourself in a season that is difficult. And so the book goes through these kind of parallels for every single season. And one of the things that when you do this as a group, or if I went into a group, I would go in with the leaves, and I might even go in with different kinds of leaves because, except in winter, even in winter, some of the trees keep leaves even though they're of no value. And we would talk about different seasons, and then we'd be looking at them through scripture and through the book, what it means to be in this season. And then I would ask each person to identify, pick up your leaf. Where are you? And I would have several of different ones because some people in the group may all be in the same season. And then some people would walk away and say, well, I'm not sure where I am. And that's okay, because sometimes we really don't know where we are. Sometimes we're in between seasons. Sometimes we find ourselves, and it's hard, between summer and winter is hard, because between summer and winter is harvest. And while you're getting all this stuff, there's also still things going on that are unpleasant, right? Because in every season, there's good and bad in every single season. I love summer. Summer is my favorite season. I hate humidity. And living in the DC area, I can't get one without the other. And I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I love the Bay Area's weather because it's always spring. But I don't like the fact that there's no seasons. So there's always good and bad. And so sometimes we think, one season is going to be nothing but good. Never. One season, even in winter, there's good, because in winter, some of the stuff that you've had to deal with begins to fall away, and you free yourself, even though we don't even understand we are free, because we're so busy trying to hold on to that which has held us bound. So you begin to, you walk through it a little bit differently if it's you and one other person, or if you're doing it as a small group for your church, or a women's group or a men's group. You do it a little bit different, but it works for all of them. It's available now. If you like, you can go on Amazon.com and pick it up. You can also go to AnitaWamble.com. That's AnitaWamble.com, and you can pick it up. If you order it from my website, I will actually sign it, autograph it for you before I send it out to you. You can also sign up to receive daily prayers at AnitaWamble.com. And you can also pick up my prayer books, God's Listening Prayer Book, and it's and all three of them also on the website.